We are live, and let's look into. So last stream we found about Dwarkesh's new book. So let's look into it. First, we'll start with Dwarkesh Patel and see what Grok has to say about it. Notable podcast and writer, best known for hosting the Dwarkesh podcast, formerly the Lunar Society podcast, where he conducts in-depth, thoroughly researched interviews with prominent figures in fields like AI, technology, science, and history. Born in India, he moved to the States around age 9 and later graduated from the University of Texas at Austin in December 21 with a degree in computer science. Wow. Wow. Okay. Degree in computer science. His podcast, which he started during the COVID-19 pandemic from his dorm room, has gained significant recognition for its intellectual rigor, earning praise from figures like Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, and Tyler Cowen. This is so cool. Wow. I started my podcast during the same time, and he just kept going and he just put in so much effort. I totally stopped my podcast after I got my job because I just felt like my podcast was not in alignment with the job. But this is really cool to see. Like, he just kept going, he owned his work. Patel's work often focuses on complex topics such as AI scaling, innovation, and cultural evolution, and he has interviewed influential personalities including Mark Andreessen, Ilya, and Tony Blair. Beyond podcasting, he writes on Substack, exploring topics like AI development and progress studies, and has been named one of Time's 100 most influential people in AI in 24. His approach involves deep preparation, sometimes reading years' worth of academic papers or consulting experts before engaging his guests. He's also authored a book, The Scaling Era, an oral history of AI, released in digital format with print pre-orders available as of late 24. Based in San Francisco, Patel continues to grow his platform organically, supported by grants like Emergent Ventures, and is celebrated for bridging technical depth with accessible, thought-provoking discussions. 20 in March. This week we are joined by the podcaster Dwarkesh Patel to discuss his new book, The Scaling Era.
We would buy instead of you throwing out your old furniture, we would buy it off you and then store it somewhere and resell it or something. And we spent like a couple weekends, I was just selling them out. We would U-haul this furniture around. And I had, actually, I had this I made this website where I was really into David Deutsch's ideas. And he's into this idea of criticism and reputation, and this is how knowledge grows. And he's into this philosopher, Karl Popper, who laid this out initially. So I made this website. I'm like, okay, this will be a cool thing to do. Like, there should be a website where the content has these primitives of like coming up with questions and then refuting them and blah blah blah. So let me make a forum that does this. And I said, well, it's influenced by the ideas of Karl Popper, so I'm going to call it popperplay.com. I didn't know what poppers were back then. I know like all these people. I mean, at the time I didn't know anybody, so I would just like cold DM people who were in the community, like, hey,
like Benzedrine and the.
Yeah, I mean, I think poppers is like like loosens up your sphincter, right? So it's like used for.
There's probably many kinds of buttons.
So anyways, I would invite cold DM people who are in the community, like, hey, I made this website, I'm inspired by your ideas. It's called Popper Play. Can you do that?
You got interesting inbound.
Yeah, that's right. Anyways, I was just doing stuff like that, and then as a student, I was sort of like, I was like middle of the pack basically. I wasn't like, in computer science itself, I wasn't like killing it or something, but I wasn't terribly falling behind either. But the podcast was another thing I was also doing on the side. That's the one that took off.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Okay. Wow. Let's go to Dwarkesh's page. Okay. Dwarkesh SB. Host of Dwarkesh podcast. I'm so pleased to present a new book with Stripe Press. The Scaling Era, an oral history of AI 2019-2025. Over the last few decades, I interviewed the key people thinking about AI: scientists, CEOs, economists, philosophers. This book curates and organizes the highlights across all these conversations. You get to see thinkers across many fields address the same gnarly questions. What is the true nature of intelligence? What will change from the millions of machine intelligences running around. What exactly will it take to get there? Several answers are unavailable. We are all running unsupervised. But between these discussions lie, I hope, some insights on the most interesting and important questions of our era. Wow. Wait, is that the guy from Three Blue, One Brown? Yes, Three Blue, One Brown. It's crazy. He made his entire persona around Three Blue, One Brown. Already bought the Kindle version, gonna start reading it tonight. Whoa, 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 whoa. I'm especially grateful to my co author, G. Leach, our editor, Rebecca Hiscott, managing director, Stripe Press, writing autofictions. 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 Okay, that's the name. I thought autofiction is like an AI that automatically creates fiction stories every single day. Okay, this is really cool. Stripe Press is a new logo. All right. Publisher Stripe Press, The Scaling Era and Oral History of AI. Hey, beautiful cover. Beautiful cover. An about page is literally right over here. Beautiful. Beautiful. I like this. I like this. Oh shit. Look at this. Look at this. So many beautiful books. Living cover. What is that? Living cover. Wow, what? What? The scaling era and oral history of AI. How did we build large language models? How do they think? If they think, what will be the world? What will the world look like if we have billions of AIs that are as smart as humans or even smarter? In a series of in depth interviews with leading AI researchers and company founders, including Anthropic CEO, DeepMind co founder, OpenAI co founder, Miri co founder, and Meta CEO Dwarkesh Patel provides the first comprehensive and contemporary portrait of the technology that is transforming our world. Drawn from his interviews on the Dwarkesh podcast, these curated excerpts range from the technical details of how LLMs work to the possibility of an AI takeover or explosive economic growth. It also includes 170 plus definitions and visualizations, classic essays on the theme, and previously unpublished interviews. The Scaling Era offers readers unprecedented insight into a transformative moment in AI's development and a vision of what comes next. Pre order on Stripe, non US. I would love to just get this book. This book looks beautiful. Book looks beautiful. Purchase on Amazon $10. No, this book requires a physical copy. Dwarkesh Patel is the host of Dwarkesh podcast, where he produces deeply researched interviews with both obscure intellectuals and the most influential figures of our time. Pre-order on Amazon. Okay, so right now we are pre-ordering. Gavin Leach is the co-founder of Arb Research, a consultancy that does empirical and conceptual work in various sciences. He has a PhD in AI. Jeff Dean, chief scientist at Google DeepMind, Google Research. Dwarkesh has done a whole series of excellent video interviews with top AI researchers and engineers, and this book is a great distillation of those conversations to help people understand modern AI models, how they are built, where they are headed, and why they are important. Boom. Bubbles and the End of Stagnation. I think I've seen this book somewhere. I've seen someone carry this book. Wow. From the moon landing to the drawing of the atomic age, the decades prior to the 1970s were characterized by the routine invention of transformative technologies at breakneck speed. By comparison, ours is an age of stagnation, of slowing median wage growth, rising inequality, and decelerated scientific discovery. In Boom, Brian and Tobias take an inductive approach to this problem. They track some of the most significant breakthroughs of the past 100 years, from the Manhattan Project and the Apollo program to Moore's Law and Bitcoin, and reverse engineer how transformative progress arises from the same dynamics that govern financial bubbles, bringing together small groups with an unified vision, vast funding, and surprisingly poor accountability. Bubbles, they conclude, aren't all bad. In fact, they create the ideal conditions for transformative innovation, integrating insights from economics, philosophy, and history Boom provides a blueprint for accelerating innovation and a path to unleash a new era of global prosperity. Brian is an investor, consultant, and writer. He's the author of The Diff, a daily newsletter covering inflection points in finance and technology. Mark Andreessen, wow. Boom makes the case that humanity's greatest risk is not climate change or misaligned super intelligent AI, but not making enough progress. A must read for those who seek to build the future. Humanity's greatest risk is not climate change or misaligned super intelligent AI, but not making enough progress. A must read for those who seek to build the future. The dot com bubble looked like the peak of delusion, but the truly deluded. The dot com bubble looked like the peak of delusion, but the truly deluded were those who wanted to indefinitely defer the future. Everyone knows bubbles can disguise madness as wisdom. Read this book called The Alternative History of Our Age. Wow. If Peter Thiel is saying something like that, that means it's good. When is it that temporary bubbles can help drive forward progress? This happened with the railroads, with the internet, and it is likely to happen with AI. Okay, I have to order this book. I have to order both of these books. Order Scaling Era and Boom. There are some things which are supposed to just be physical. I feel like this one guy, I read somebody's talk about books, and they are like, think about books more like medicine, that you have a bunch of, you don't buy a medicine only when you're sick. You just always keep a bunch of medicine at your home. I don't think that's true for me, but anyways, that was his idea. And I feel the same thing. Like, I have a stack of my books right over here. It just feels really good to see all of them right over here. It feels like, okay, number one, it just gives me the idea that, okay, I'm a smart guy because I'm into books. But also, it's very much like you can just pick a random book, you can read something. So let's pick up this Nietzsche book, The Gay Science, random page, and you will learn something so cool. The Fool Interrupts. The writer of this book is no misanthrope. Today one pays too dearly for hatred of man. If one would hate the way man was hated formerly, demonically, wholly, without exception, with a full heart, with a whole love of hatred, then one would have to renounce contempt. And how much fine joy, how much patience, how much graciousness even do we owe precisely to our contempt. Moreover, it makes us the elect of God. Refined contempt is our taste and privilege, our art, our virtue perhaps, as we are the most modern of moderns. And becoming bright again. We open handed and rich in spirit, standing by the road like open wells with no intention to fend off anyone who feels like drawing from us. We unfortunately do not know how to defend ourselves where we want to. We have no way of preventing people from darkening us. The time in which we live throws into us what is most time bound. Its dirty birds drop their filth into us, boys their gewgaws, and exhausted wanderers who come to us to rest their little and large miseries. But we shall do what we have always done. Whatever one casts into us, we take down into our depth, for we are deep, and we do not forget and become bright again. Sometimes you don't even understand what he's saying, but it's just so poetic. I don't even understand what he's talking about. But there are some things that just hit, like the one thing where he said that where wanderers come to rest. This is very interesting because it also reminds me of this one talk by a Stanford professor who talks about. Wait, was it him? No, I don't think it was him. But it was someone who said that a lot of times we seek answers outside. We chase the shiny objects only to realize that how unfulfilling it is. Only to realize that the answer was always within us. Okay, too philosophical. Alright, what's the next one? Poor Charlie's Almanac, the essential wit and wisdom of Charles Munger. Spend each day trying to be a little wiser than you were when you woke up. Spend each day trying to be a little wiser than you were when you woke up. Charlie Munger advises in Poor Charlie's Almanac, originally published in 2005. This compilation of 11 talks by the legendary Berkshire Hathaway vice chairman has become a touchstone for a generation of investors and entrepreneurs, delivered with Munger's characteristic rhetorical flair. Poor Charlie's Almanac draws on his encyclopedic knowledge of business, finance, history, philosophy, physics, and ethics to introduce the lattice work of mental models that underpin his rational and rigorous approach to life, learning, and decision making. It is an essential volume for any reader seeking to go to bed a little wiser than when they woke up. The psychology of human misjudgment. This is beautiful. This is beautiful. This book is something of a publishing miracle, never advertised yet, year after year, selling many thousands of copies from its internet site. Shane Parrish. Poor Charlie's Almanac is a timeless classic that will change how you approach life. There is $1 billion education inside this book. Wow. David Senra. If I could only read one book to help me succeed in life and business, this is the book I would read. Charlie's timeless wisdom has inspired millions and will continue to resonate for generations to come. Scaling people. Tactics for management and company building. Management company building. Corporate officer and advisor at Stripe, chief operating officer of Stripe from 2014 to 2021, helping the company grow from fewer than 200 employees to more than 7,000. She spent 10 years at Google leading business teams, including overseeing aspects of Gmail, Google Apps, and consumer operations, as well as serving as a vice president for AdWords, Google Offers, and Google's self-driving car project. She serves on the boards of Ameresco, The Atlantic, Aurora Innovation, and HubSpot. She lives outside of Boston with her husband, 2 children, and 2 neurotic Dashens. What does that mean? Dashens. Oh, okay. That's what it means. Praise. Let's give a quick follow to Claire Hughes Johnson. Work at Stripe, author of Scaling People, board member, mom, wife, and busy friend. Never enough time to read all on my list. Pretend to garden. Roughly that. Elad Gill. I was so excited to learn that Claire has taken her many years of operating excellence from Stripe and Google and distilled it into a book. Scaling People is a key book to be added to the shelf of any people leader and manager. This makes sense. Stripe is today, Stripe, SpaceX, these are like the biggest private startups, and you would rather want to learn from someone who was involved in building that. Jason Citron. Claire has demystified how you run a large, high-performance organization with clear concepts and practical templates that you can start implementing today. Bill Gurley. The world expects founders to succeed and thrive as their company grows, yet no one takes the time to give them the skills and processes necessary to achieve great leadership. Now someone has. Hats off to Claire for writing Scaling People. Pieces of action. Whoa. Whenever Bush, engineer, inventor, educator, and public face of government-funded science, offers an inside account of one of the most innovative research and development ecosystems of the 20th century. As the architect and administrator of an R&D pipeline that efficiently coordinated the work of civilian scientists and the military during World War II, he was central to catalyzing the development of radar and proximity fuse, the mass production of penicillin, and the initiation of the Manhattan Project. Pieces of Action offers us hard-won lessons in how to operate and manage effectively within complex organizations, build bridges between people and disciplines, and drive ambitious, unprecedented programs to fruition. Science, the endless frontier. Wow. Where is my flying car? Engineer and futurist Jace Shores sets out to answer the deceptively simple question posed in the book's title. What starts as an exploration of the technical limitations of building flying cars evolves into an examination of the global economic stagnation that started in the 70s, from the failure to adopt nuclear energy and suppression of cold fusion and nanotechnology to the rise of a counterculture hostile to progress. Hall recounts how our collective ambitions for the future were derailed, with devastating consequences for global wealth creation and distribution. Hall then outlines a framework for a future powered by exponential progress, one in which we build as much in the world of atoms as we do in the world of bits, one rich in abundance and wonder. Wow, the big score. This is what Stripe is really good at. Whoa. Scientific freedom. Hey, every, what do we say? Every image, every book cover slaps. The elixir of civilization. Working in public, the making and maintenance of open source software, the art of doing science and engineering, the making of Prince of Persia. Whoa, I feel like somebody recommended me this book. I don't know. Yeah. Oh shit, I think it was my roommate. He mentioned to me about this book. Before Prince of Persia was best-selling video game franchise and a Disney movie, it was an Apple II computer game created and programmed by a lone developer Jordan Mechner. Mechner scanned and revealing journals from the time capture, the journey from his parents' basement to the forefront of the fast-growing 1980s video game industry as a 20-year-old fresh out of college with a liberal arts degree, and the creative, technical, personal, and professional struggles that brought the prince into the homes of millions of people worldwide. In the making of Prince of Persia on the 30th anniversary of the game's release, Mechner looks back at the journals he kept from 85 to 93 and annotates them with insights into the game that established him as a pioneer of cinematic storytelling in the industry. Wow. Probably my favorite book on game development, the best biography I've ever read. It's a genuinely delightful book, even if you don't care about the history of video games. To read Mechner's contemporaneous logs of his wrestling with his tools and machines is to take a journey back to a heroic age of games authorship. Prince of Persia was the first computer game I ever fell in love with. Mechner's journey is a universal one for anyone creating something brand new, and it brought me back to the early crazy days of building Instagram. That's fun. You give a, yeah, you're basically dropping. It's cool. I don't know what to say, but okay. Get together. How to build a community with your people. Get together. Although communities feel magical, they don't come together by magic. Whether starting a run crew, connecting with fans online, or sparking a movement of capable teachers, the secret to getting people together is to build a community with people, not for them. In Get Together, the founders of the community strategy agency People and Company, Bailey, Kevin, and Kai, provide a practical and heartfelt guide to create thriving communities, both in person and online. The authors break down into clear steps the challenges of getting passionate people together, helping individuals and organizations navigate the intricacies of leading a community, and share true stories of everyday people who have created vibrant communities. Get Together shows that if we join forces as company and customers, artists and fans, organizers and advocates will do more together than we ever could alone. I highly recommend Get Together for anyone who's looking to crack the code on building a community. Found our Girls Night In, found our Story Corps, Instant Pot. Tells stories and reveals the insights of community building. Don't start one without reading this book. Generous, practical, and heartfelt guide to creating community in the digital age with no jargon and no nonsense. Lay out simple steps for helping people come together in meaningful and powerful ways. Systems of engineering management. It's beautiful to see the cover of an engineering book be so welcoming because it's just a plant. It's not some crazy. Yeah, it's interesting when you. It's interesting, like what what Dwarkesh had. The book of Dwarkesh cover could be called as minimalist, which kind of goes with the AI thing, with the tech AI look, but it's very minimalist. It isn't. They don't have just added a bunch of blueprint of integrated circuits behind to make it look like, oh, this is about tech. But look at this. It's a tech book, systems, system management, system design, and it just has a plant. Very welcoming to new people. Drawing on his experience at Dig. Dig is coming back. Who's the author? Will Larson. Engineering leader at technology companies including Yahoo, Dig, Uber, Stripe, and Calm. Wow. While management is foundational to any organization, engineering management in particular presents its own set of challenges, especially in high growth environments. How and when should your engineers pay down technical debt? How do you tackle a seemingly endless stream of migrations? The revolt of the public. Wow, these book covers are beautiful. Tyler Cohen, Stubborn Attachments, a vision for a society of free, prosperous, and responsible individuals. Throughout history, economic growth has alleviated human misery, improved human happiness and opportunity, expanded political rights, and lengthened human lives. If we want to prolong growth trends and the overwhelmingly positive outcomes for societies that come with them, every individual must become more concerned with the welfare of those around us. So, how do we enable such altruism? In Stubborn Attachment, a culmination of 20 years of philosophical and economic thinking and research, Tyler Cohen argues that reason and common sense can help free us of the faulty ideas that hold us back as people and as a society, allowing us to set our sights on the long term struggles that maximize sustainable economic growth while respecting human rights. At its heart, Stubborn Attachments makes the contemporary moral case for economic growth and delivers a dose of inspiration and optimism about the future. The Dream Machine. Behind every great revolution is a vision, and behind one of the greatest revolution of our time, personal computing, is the vision of J.C.R. Licklider. He wasn't an engineer and he didn't start a company or write code. Instead, he was a relentless visionary who saw great potential in the way individuals could interact with computers and software. At a time when computers were a short step removed from mechanical data processors, he was an enthusiastic catalyst for the seminal research that ultimately led to the internet. In a simultaneously compelling personal narrative and comprehensive historical exposition, The Dream Machine tells the story of the birth of the computing revolution through the life of a man who shifted our understanding of what computers were and could be. The book now appears in a new edition which includes the original text of Licklider's three most influential writings. It's so hard to write a book, right? Like, so many decisions have to be taken with respect to what goes into this book. It's kind of crazy. High Growth Handbook. We Are as Gods. Whoa. A film about Stuart Brand. Synopsis. Original score. Whoa. We Are as Gods. Beneath the Surface. A Stripe Press podcast about infrastructure. Stripe partners with millions of world's most innovative businesses. These businesses are the result of many different inputs. Perhaps the most important ingredient is ideas. Stripe Press highlights ideas that we think can be broadly useful. Some books contain entirely new material, some are collections of existing work reimagined, and others are republications of previous works that have remained relevant over time or have renewed relevance today. Right, like Charlie Munger. contain entirely new material. Some are collections of existing work reimagined, and others are republications of previous works. Wow. All are hits. Living cover. Wow, look at this. Look at this. Bro. What? Oh, there is music.
That's why you never kind of, are going to find any IQ gland. There's nowhere in the brain where if you hit it, you eliminate fluid intelligence. I just think that, it'll turn out that this doesn't exist. Because what your brain is doing is a lot of learning individual specialized problems. And then once those individual problems are learned, then they get recombined for fluid intelligence. And that's just, like intelligence. Typically with a large neural network model, you can always pull out kind of a small model, which is
What is this? Wow. We have to post this. Yes. This is amazing. I don't know why. Whoa.
I think with the current level of capabilities, I think we have a pretty good set of ideas how to align them. But I would not underestimate the difficulty of alignment of models that are actually smarter than us, of models that are capable of misrepresenting their intentions.
Dwarkish Patel, the scaling era, the scaling era. Does it just keep saying scaling era everywhere? Yeah, scaling era, Dwarkish Patel.
That's why you never kind of, are going to find any IQ. Is an interesting thing. When you think of an AI agent, it turns out the AI agents is going to exponentially increase compute usage because you're now not even bound by just one human invoking a program. It's one human invoking programs that invoke lots more programs, right? So that's going to create massive, massive demand at scale for compute infrastructure. So our hyperscale business, Azure business, I think that's like other hyperscalers. I think that's a big thing. I think 2023 was the sort of moment for me where it went from kind of AGI as a sort of theoretical abstract thing, make models to like, I see it, I feel it. I'm like, I see the path, I see where it's going. I think I can see the cluster we're trained on, the rough combination of algorithms, the people, like how it's happening. And I think, most of the world is not, most of the people feel it, they're like right here, right? But I think a lot more of the world is going to start feeling it. And I think that's going to start being kind of intense.
Wow, 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 wow.
Just before OpenAI started, Julia, who you interviewed, one of the first things he said to me was, look, the models, they just want to learn. You have to understand this, the models, they just want to learn. And it was a bit like a Zen koan. Like, I listened to this, and then I became like, over the years after this, again, I would be kind of, the one who would formalize a lot of these things and kind of put them together. But like, just kind of what that told me is that that phenomenon that I'd seen wasn't just some random thing that I'd seen. It was broad. It was more general, right? The models just want to learn. You get the obstacles out of their way, right? You give them good data. You give them enough space to operate in. You don't do something stupid like condition them badly numerically, and they want to learn. They'll do it. They'll do it.
This is crazy. What is this? This is crazy. Who made this? Pre-order and print. Pre-order and print. Yes, we're gonna pre-order this and print hardcore pre-order. And promotion code shipping. Wow. Purchase on Amazon. And there is no way to get like a quick preview of this. Okay. Now we'll go to Twitter will be like, what are the key takeaways of the book, The Skating Era? The power of scaling. The book emphasizes the central role of scaling large models, more data, and greater compute in driving AI breakthroughs. Interviews with figures like Dario Amodei and Ilya highlights how scaling has unlocked unexpected capabilities in LLMs, suggesting it may remain a key driver towards AGI. How LLMs work and think. Patel explores the technical underpinnings of LLMs, offering accessible explanations of their mechanics, strengths, and limitations. The book debates whether these models think or merely compress and regurgitate data, drawing from diverse perspectives like those of Demis and Eliezer. Part 2, AGI. A recurring question is whether scaling LLMs can lead to AGI, AI capable of human like reasoning across domains. The book presents a spectrum of views from optimism about continued progress to skepticism about the need for new paradigms beyond current architectures. Alignment challenges. The potential for misalignment where AI systems might not share human goals is a critical concern. Conversations with safety focused thinkers like Yudkowsky underscore the risk and uncertainties of controlling increasingly powerful AI, balanced against balanced against more pragmatic takes from industry leaders like Mark. Resource demands. Achieving AGI requires vast inputs, computer power, data, and energy. The book details the escalating sheer input needed as discussed by researchers like Ajaya Kotra, open philanthropy, and logistical and economic hurdles this presents. Escalating sheer input needed. But it examines the economic and social ramifications of advanced AI from explosive growth and automation insight from economists to existential risk AI takeover scenarios. It paints a dual picture of promise and peril as AI scales to billions of human level or super intelligent systems. A snapshot of a pivotal era. Structured as an oral history, the book captures the voices of AI's architects at a turning point 2019-2025, blending technical depth with philosophical reflection. It serves as both a historical record and introduction to AI's trajectory, enriched with over 170 definitions, visualizations, and essays. Diverse perspectives. The curated interviews reveal conflicting yet confident viewpoints. Example, technical optimism from lab readers versus speculative caution from theorists, offering readers a nuanced map of the field's debates rather than a single narrative. Whoa, an exclusive excerpt. Okay, interesting. Throughout the 20th century, we got used to computers being limited and uneven, simultaneously superhumanly fast and precise, with perfect recall, but also completely unable to understand natural language, infer anything from non symbolic data like images, or apply common sense to even slightly ambiguous requests. But we haven't gotten used to LLM's unevenness, so we tend to round it down to a stochastic parrot or up to something akin to a person, a replacement for expertise. Unlike past systems, LLMs are massively multitask. One large model we can use for most functions that outperforms most single task systems at their own game. This means that, for example, the car dealership AI is perfectly happy to answer your questions about advanced mathematics. Multiple US corporations created their own versions of LLMs using a large fraction of the world's copyrighted data. Hmm. One of them open sourced its version after spending hundreds of millions of dollars making it. As a result of other companies developing LLMs, a producer of video game hardware briefly became the world's most valuable business. Video game hardware briefly became the world's most valuable business. It gets called a large model, but it weights, but yet its weights fit on a thumb drive. Even the most powerful versions are freely available for casual use. It takes about 10 seconds to have it read and discuss a long book with you. In short bursts, it can code as many human professionals. One major software company is now using it to generate around 25% of its new code and merging it into its code base unedited. Wow, who is this major company? Even so, most people don't seem that interested in LLMs. Currently, only 5% of companies use it officially. The market doesn't seem to expect it to become superhuman. The leading company building it is on track to lose $5 billion in 24. Some say it is just a compressed version of the internet, although it occasionally generates information that isn't on the internet. Sometimes it restates material out of context, like when it advised someone to eat rocks for the nutritional benefits. We always assumed robots would be like computers, rigid, logical, and unable to create. Instead, we find it hard to stop LLMs from making stuff up. Some of its creators talk about it in metaphysical terms. We are creating God, or in uncanny terms, they just want to learn. Some activists anticipating disaster have called for a ban on systems more powerful than the current version. LLMs can be made to subvert its intensive ethics training just by talking to it funny. One version wasn't trained properly, and as a result, tried to get a journalist to leave his wife and threatened a professor for writing about its bizarre behavior. It was quickly patched, but the patched version found articles about its predecessor online and wrote an eulogy for it. Still, millions of people talk to it for hours every day. Some people form close attachments to it, even full-blown relationships. As of it writing, as of this writing, common way of assessing it is one of the most visited sites in the world. The trajectory suggests much more progress is coming. Billions of dollars and many of the world's brightest scientists and engineers are chasing a version of LLMs that can do anything a person can do, or do anything better than anyone. Collectively, the world is investing more than $100 billion a year on AI, more than the combined spending on NASA, the NIH, and NSF, and all cancer research. And leading companies have started multi-billion-dollar infrastructure projects to power it. This doesn't seem to be the funding ceiling either. Major players claim it will be a much bigger deal than the internet, and the current level of investment still falls short of the dot-com boom. When LLMs fail in a dramatic way or does something new in a flawed manner, people quote a new maxim: "This is the worst this technology will ever be." I spent much of 23 and 24 speaking to key people involved in building and studying LLMs. Some have solved some of the hardest open problems in the field. Some believe the technology will solve all scientific and economic problems. Some believe that the same technology could soon end the world, and some are in all of these categories at once. All of these predictions could be right or wrong, but that's irrelevant. The questions we must ask ourselves now are: will we make the big one, an AGI? If so, how? Having made it, will we regret it? And what then? What then? The scaling era. Well, let's see if we can find sample. Can we find a sample? Why is it $9? Okay, Kindle edition. Stripe Press, the scaling era. An oral history of AI. How do we build large language models? How do they think? If they think, what will the world look like if we have billions of AIs that are as smart as humans or even smarter? In a series of in-depth interviews with leading AI researchers and company, provides the first comprehensive and contemporary portrait of the technology that is transforming our world. Drawn from his interviews in the Dwarkesh podcast, these curated excerpts range from the technical details of how LLMs work to the possibility of an AI takeover or explosive economic growth. Conversations cut through the noise to explore the topics most compelling to those at the forefront of the field: the power of scaling, the potential for misalignment, the sheer input required for AGI, and the economic and social ramifications of superintelligence. There's a Sherlock Holmes story that captures our relationship with large language models. Wait, by the way, how many pages do we have? Oh, table of contents doesn't have pages. Wait, what? Is this the entire book? No, this is just a sample. Leopold, Dwarkesh, Ilya, Dario. There's a Sherlock Holmes story that captures a relationship with large language models. A new client comes to Baker Street. With a single glance, Holmes rattles off the man's life story, that he lived in China, that he's a Freemason, that he writes a lot. The client, astonished, asks how Holmes knows all this. In great detail, Holmes explained the series of deductions that led him to his conclusions. The client responds, I thought at first that you had done something clever, but I see that there was nothing in it after all. Because we witness a series of small improvements to LLM's intelligence piecemeal over years, and because we think we understand how they work, it's very easy to have the same reaction. There's nothing in them after all. That dismissiveness highlights why it's important to step back and see how remarkable their progress has been and how little we understand them. Let's try to see the last 6 years of fresh. A new technology arrives. Call it a thing. Broadly speaking, we made it by having it read the entire internet until it learned how to respond when we talk to it. Through some 15 trillion rounds of trial and error, it wound up pretty smart. We don't really know how the resulting model works. We didn't design it so much as grow it. Unlike all past software, the thing can speak with flawless grammar on any topic in any major world language. It can write in any literary style. It can see and discuss what it sees. It knows facts about millions of people. If you ask it to give smarter answers or otherwise imply that you yourself are smart, it replies more thoughtfully. Developing it solves several open problems in AI, from learning complex tasks without explicit human labeling to processing data from multiple senses, such as video and audio, simultaneously. It only acts when prompted, and the only action it ever takes is to predict what should come next. The thing is already plainly superhuman on a few dimensions: reading and writing speed, breadth of knowledge, number of languages spoken fluently, and accuracy of predicting the next word in a sentence. Despite not being intentionally trained for it, it's an incredibly effective general compression algorithm. In theory, with the right data, it could perform any task. It is also blatantly subhuman in other domains. The sheer number of examples it needs to permanently learn new skills, its failure at precise symbol manipulation tasks, and its lack of certain kinds of common sense, episodic memory, and ability to seek out new evidence and be corrected. People who work with it know to constantly doubt its output. It's like having a brilliant but somewhat deluded amnesic coworker. Throughout the 20th century, we got used to computers being limited and uneven, simultaneously superhumanly fast and precise, with perfect recall, but also completely unable to understand natural language, infer anything from non symbolic data like images, or apply common sense to even slightly ambiguous requests. But we haven't gotten used to the thing's unevenness, so we tend to round it down to a stochastic parrot, or up something akin to a person, a replacement for expertise. Unlike past systems, the thing is massively multitask. One large model we can use for most functions, which outperforms most single task systems at their own game. This means that, for example, the car dealership AI is perfectly happy to answer your questions about advanced mathematics. Multiple US corporations created their own versions of the thing using a large fraction of the world's copyrighted data. One of them open sourced its version after spending hundreds of millions of dollars making it. As a result of other companies developing the thing, a producer of video game hardware briefly became the world's most valuable business. It gets called a large model, yet its weights fit on a thumb drive. Even the most powerful versions are freely available for casual use. It takes about 10 seconds to have it read and discuss a long book with you. In short bursts, it can code as well as many human professionals. Google is now using it to generate around 25% of its new code and merging it into its code base unedited. Wow, unedited. Even so, most people don't seem that interested in the thing. Currently, only 5% of companies use it. The market doesn't seem to expect it to become superhuman. The leading company building it was on track to lose $5 billion in 2024. Some say it is just a compressed version of the internet, although it occasionally generates information that isn't on the internet. Sometimes it restates material out of context, like when it advised someone to eat rocks for their nutritional benefits. We always assumed robots will be like computers, rigid, logical, and unable to create. Instead, we find it hard to stop the thing from making stuff up. Some of its creators talk about it in metaphysical terms. We are creating God, or in uncanny terms, they just want to learn. Some activists anticipating disaster have called for a ban on systems more powerful than the current version. The thing can be made to subvert its intensive ethics training just by talking to it funny. One version wasn't trained properly and as a result tried to get a journalist to leave his wife and threatened a professor for writing about its bizarre behavior. It was quickly patched, but the patched version found articles about the predecessor online and wrote a eulogy for it. Still, millions of people talk to it for hours every day. Some people form close attachments to it, even full blown relationships. As of this writing, a common way of accessing it is one of the most visited sites in the world. The trajectory suggests much more progress is coming. Billions of dollars and many of the world's brightest scientists and engineers are chasing a version of the thing that can do anything a person can do, or do anything better than anyone. Collectively, the world is investing more than $100 a year on AI, more than the combined spending on NASA, the NIH, the NSF, and all cancer research. And leading companies have started multi-billion-dollar infrastructure projects to power it. This doesn't seem to be the funding ceiling either. Major players claim it will be a much bigger deal than the internet, and the current level of investment still falls short of the dot-com boom. When the thing fails in a dramatic way or does something new in a flawed manner, people quote a new maxim. This is the worst this technology will ever be. The thing, of course, is a LLM or the R-led, scaffolded, and otherwise improved AIs with an LLM at their core. Systems like GPT, Claude, and Gemini. I spent much of 23 and 24 speaking to key people involved in building and studying these systems. Some of them have solved some of the hardest open problems in their field. Some believe the technology will solve all scientific and economic problems. Some believe that same technology could soon end the world, and some are in all of these categories at once. Each of the following chapters deals with a key theme in contemporary AI research, though through relevant excerpts from these conversations. We begin in chapter 1 with the concept of scaling. How do we build LMs? Will the techniques we have used so far continue to work with much bigger models? We discuss evals, the science of testing what LLMs can do. How do LLMs work? How do they think if they think? Safety and alignment. How can we make these models share our goals, and what happens if we can? We look at inputs. If more chips, power, and data are all we need to continue making progress, do we have enough? Address the impact these systems will have on the world. Consider what will happen if we create AI that surpasses human intelligence. Interviews predictions for when the technology will reach full human level generality. This book documents highly informed views you will struggle to find in print elsewhere. The interview excerpts have been edited for clarity and flow, particularly to add references that were clearer in context. The interviews are mostly scientists and engineers, so the discussion is often highly technical. When a concept isn't explained during the conversation, I include notes defining the terms and elaborating on the arguments. At the end of the book, I have included profiles of the interviewees, references to relevant papers, a glossary of terms, and an appendix with a few influential essays on LLMs in the future. A note on the slant of these conversations. Many of the people in this book are not only scientists but also industry players, founders, product developers, and equity holders. This presents a conflict of interest, and they are self-selected to believe AI is a big deal, but the cynical view that they are simply talking to their book, exaggerating the importance of current and future systems to market their products isn't very helpful in explaining the broader context. The industry as a whole believes its own hype. The vast capital expenditure don't make financial sense unless AI turns out to be of extreme economic significance. Right or wrong, these individuals are betting on AI. I invite you to consider four core questions that animate them. Will we make the big one an AGI? If so, how? If so, how? Having made it, will be regretted, and what then? Primer. If you're new to machine learning, here are some key terms you will need to know and how they fit together. Compute, data, hyperparameters, architecture, loss, pre-training, human preferences, reward model, post-training, weights, model, query, inference, hyperparameters, activations, output. A variable that helps define a system or transformation applied to input data, a dimension in model space in machine learning, a numerical value that is adjusted iteratively during model training to encode patterns learned from the data. Activation, the value a model produces when processing a specific query, which depends on the weights it has learned during training and the inputs provided by the user, what gets input into the next layer of neurons in the model. Token, the basic unit of data in an LLM, typically representing roughly one word. However, transformers can be trained to emit more than just text tokens. Models can also output actions such as searching the web and pixels, among many other data types. Loss, hyperparameter, floating point number, artificial general intelligence. Oh, someone tried to define the scaling hypothesis, the idea that increasing the size, training data, and computational inputs of LLMs will be sufficient to achieve AGI. AGI, an AI system capable of performing any task a human can perform, any task a group of humans can perform, or any task the average human can perform. Example tasks are boundless, but imagine an AI and its copies performing every role in a large corporation, including strategy, design, management, production, and distribution, performing noble level scientific research, including the experiments and breakthrough mathematical insights, or executing a coup on a major world government. The term AGI is sometimes used to refer specifically to human level AI, while ASI denotes AI systems that surpass human level capabilities. Why is bigger better? As a riding flood reaches more populated heights, machines will begin to do well in areas a greater number can appreciate. When the highest peaks are covered, there will be machines that can interact as intelligently as any human on any subject. The presence of minds in machines will then become self evident. When OpenAI released GPT-2 in 2019, it was barely discussed outside of AI circles. 3 years later, GPT 3.5 took the world by storm with perhaps the fastest recorded user growth of any software in history. There are a few reasons for this, not least the friendlier user interface of ChatGPT, but a key reason is that GPT 3.5 was much smarter than its predecessors. The main reason it got smarter is scaling. The researchers used roughly the same design as GPT-2 but created a much larger version trained on much more data. It's hard to overstate the magnitudes. The compute needed to train a leading model is now 10 billion times higher than it was in 2010. The compute used for a trained an AI model was the size of a laptop. The compute used for Google DeepMind's Gemini Ultra was the size of New York City. Wow. In this period, the compute used to train each frontier model doubled every 6 months, 4 times faster than Moore's law predicts. OpenAI took a $4 million risk in training GPT-3 because it had stumbled upon so-called neural scaling laws, curves that predict how much models will improve as we increase the resources used to create them. So far, these laws have accurately predicted the improvement resulting from exponential increases in investment. This has inspired confidence in 100 million training runs, which would otherwise have been perceived as wildly unreasonable business risk. The scaling hypothesis is the idea that this resource intensive strategy is all it will take to build a human level AI system, and possibly systems that surpass human level intelligence. More recently, the scaling hypothesis is the idea that this resource intensive strategy is all it will take to build a human level AI system, and possibly systems that surpass human level intelligence. More recently, a second form of scaling has emerged: inference scaling. This involves increasing the compute used to answer each question by training the model to think longer, or by applying explicit algorithms on top of an LLM to explore multiple paths. The strategy yields significant improvements on tasks that require chains of reasoning. In this chapter, we hear from some pioneers of scaling about why it works, discuss the evolution in neuroscience of human and artificial intelligence, and speculate about whether scaling will continue to create increasingly impressive systems. Fundamentally, what is the explanation for why scaling works? Why is the universe organized such that if you throw big blobs of compute at a wide enough distribution of data, the thing becomes intelligent? Fundamentally, what is the explanation for why scaling works? Why is the universe organized such that if you throw big blobs of compute at a wide enough distribution of data, the thing becomes intelligent? Dario. The truth is that we still, by the way, I don't know what's happening to my throat. Sorry about that. The truth is that we still don't know. It's something entirely just a contingent empirical fact. It's a fact that you could sense from the data, but we still don't have a satisfying explanation for it. If I were to try to give one, and I'm just waving my hands when I say this, there are these ideas in physics around long tail or power law correlations or effects. When you have a bunch of features, you get a lot of the total information in the early part of the distribution before the tails. For language, that would be big things like figuring out that there are parts of speech or that nouns follow verbs. Afterwards, you learn more and more subtle correlations. It makes sense why every order of magnitude added captures more of the distribution. What's not clear at all is why it scales so smoothly with a number of model parameters, and why it scales so smoothly with the amount of data. By scaling law, we are referring to the fact that when you go from Claude 1 to Claude 2, there's a smooth improvement in how well the model predicts the next token. We may not know why it's happening, but can you at least predict empirically? Here is the loss at which this ability will emerge. Here's the place where this circuit will emerge. Is that at all predictable, or are you just looking at the loss number? That is much less predictable. What's predictable is this statistical average, this loss, this entropy. It's sometimes predictable even to several significant figures, which you don't see outside of physics. You don't expect to see it in the messy empirical field. Specific abilities are very hard to predict. Back when I was working on GPT-2 and GPT-3, we were asking, when does arithmetic come into place? When do models learn to code? Specific abilities are very hard to predict. Back when I was working on GPT-2 and GPT-3, we were asking, when does arithmetic come into place? When do models learn to code? Sometimes it's very abrupt. It's like how you can predict statistical averages of the weather, but the weather on one particular day is very hard to predict. One of the first things OpenAI co-founder and former chief scientist Ilya said to me was, look, the models just want to learn. You have to understand this. The models just want to learn. It was a bit like a Zen koan. I listened to this and I became enlightened. I don't know what they're talking about with this loss number. Specific abilities are very hard to predict. Back when I was working on GPT-2 and GPT-3, we were asking, when does arithmetic come into place? When do models learn to code? Sometimes it's very abrupt. It's like how you can predict statistical averages of the weather, but the weather on one particular day is very hard to predict. One of the first things OpenAI co-founder and former chief scientist Ilya said to me was, look, the models just want to learn. You have to understand this. The models just want to learn. It was a bit like a Zen koan. This is so cool. This is so cool. Scaling is the main way these models are getting better. Why does that work? Why is the universe this way? Jared. Scaling is the way these models are getting better. Why does that work? Why is the universe this way? I have a few hypotheses, but maybe first we should talk about what scaling is. Scaling is this relation we have noticed. As you make AI systems larger, increasing the number of parameters they have, training on more data, or increasing the total amount of compute used for training, you get really, really predictable trends for the performance of these systems as you scale up. This holds true over many, many orders of magnitude, although at first we were only looking at large language models, the GPT-1 and GPT-2 era. It also seems true of multimodal models and all sorts of other AI systems. This universality is really striking and really important. If you have a phenomena that only occurs in some really niche situation, then maybe there's a niche explanation for what's going on there. Whereas scaling seems so universal that you would expect there to be some kind of simple, general explanation. I can talk a little bit about theories we have developed to explain this. They are the kind of theories physicists like. You just have to make the right assumptions and the results follow. But we don't really know all of the details of how neural networks work. We are still very confused. There's a lot left to understand, even to just validate some of our hypotheses. I can talk a little about theories we have developed to explain this. They are the kind of theories physicists like. You just have to make the right assumptions and the result follows. But we don't really know all of the details of how neural networks work. We are still very confused. There's a lot left to understand, even to just validate some of our hypotheses. What is that simple explanation? I understand that the full theory might not be clear, but what's the general heuristic? You can think of neural networks as mapping the data to some kind of data manifold that has some dimensionality. All neural networks are really doing then is basically fitting a curve to that data manifold. This is all very abstract, but probably everyone who's done a little bit of science has done an experiment, gotten a bunch of data points on X versus Y, and fit some kind of curve to that. The idea is that maybe neural networks are doing something abstractly, as simple as fitting some multidimensional curve. In general, what's the simplest way you can fit a curve? How seriously do you take these scaling laws? The thing is, the scaling law tells you what happens to the log of your next word prediction accuracy. There's a whole separate challenge of linking this next word prediction accuracy to actual reasoning capability. I do believe there is a link, but it's complicated. We may find that there are other things that can give us more reasoning per unit of effort. Carl Schulman. If the current scale up works, we're going to get to AGI really fast, like within the next 10 years. If the current scale up doesn't work, we are left with the baseline, the economy growing at only 2% a year. The best way to think about this might be in the 2000s before the deep learning revolution. How did I think about AGI timelines? How have I updated since then based on what has happened with deep learning? Back then, I would have said we know the brain is an information processing device. Human intelligence works, intelligence is possible. Not only is it possible, it was created by evolution on Earth. There are some complexities. What if it was a freak accident and it didn't happen on any of the other planets? I have a paper with philosopher Nick Bostrom about this. Basically, it's not that important. There's convergent evolution. Octopi are also quite sophisticated. If a special event was required at the level of forming cells at all or forming brains at all, we get to skip that because we already exist and we are choosing to build computers. We have that advantage. So evolution gives something of an upper bound. Really intensive, massive brute force search and things like evolutionary algorithms can produce intelligence. Isn't the fact that octopi and other mammals got to the point of being pretty intelligent but non human level intelligent evidence that there's a hard step between a cephalopod and a human? It doesn't seem particularly compelling. One source of evidence is work by Susanna Herculano Hausel. Bitter lesson. So he said there are two things you can scale: search and learning. LMs are about the learning aspect. You have worked on search together throughout your career where you have an agent interacting with an environment. Is that the direction that needs to be explored again? Or is that something that needs to be added to LMs so they can interact with the data or the world in some way? Yeah, that's on the right track. These foundation models are world models of a kind, and to do really creative problem solving, you need to start searching. Think about something like AlphaGo and the famous Move 37. Where did that come from? Did it come from data it had seen of human games? No, it came from the model identifying a move as being unlikely but plausible, and then via process of search coming to understand that it was actually a very good move. To get real creativity, you need to search through spaces of possibilities and find these hidden gems. That's what creativity is. Current language models don't really do that. They're mimicking the data, they are mimicking all the human ingenuity they have seen from all these internet data, which are originally derived from humans. These models can blend things. They can do Harry Potter in the style of Kanye West, even though that's never been done before. But a system that goes beyond that, generalizing in novel ways and doing something truly creative, not just blending existing things, requires searching through a space of possibilities for these hidden gems. That requires search. So I don't think we'll see systems that truly step beyond their training data until we have powerful search in the process. How linked are longer context windows? A friend made the point that if you look at the new applications unlocked by GPT-4 relative to what GPT 3.5 unlocked, it's not clear that it's that much more impressive. GPT 3.5 could run Perplexity or whatever. So if there's a diminishing increase in capabilities that cost exponentially more, that's actually a bearish sign of what GPT-5 will unlock in terms of economic impact. Good question. The jump between 3.5 and 4 is pretty huge, so another jump of that size is ridiculously good. If GPT-5 is a 3.5 to 4 size jump in terms of its ability to do SAT and this kind of stuff, it doesn't feel like we are going to jump to utter genius in the next generation of models, but it does feel like we will get to very smart models plus lots of reliability. It's unclear what that looks like. I don't want people to come away thinking that models aren't going to get much better. The jumps we have seen so far are huge. Even if those continue on a smaller scale, we are still in for extremely smart, very reliable agents over the next couple of orders of magnitude. We have a lot more jumps coming, even if those jumps are smaller, relatively speaking. That's still a pretty stark improvement in capability. Leopold. Okay, that's the stream. That is the stream. We are hitting 1 hour 40 minutes. Thank you.